So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rebecca Baxter. I'm the Development Director of Kellogg College. It's such a pleasure to see you online, wherever you are in the world. This afternoon, I'm delighted to introduce Kellogg alumnus, Rahul Raina, who studied the MSc in Software Engineering, matriculating in 2013. I'm going to hand over now to him. Absolutely fascinating presentation on responsible AI. There will be time for questions at the end of the session. And what I'd invite you to do is put any questions you have in the chat, and now we can read them out to Rahul on your behalf. So without further ado, I'm delighted to hand you over now. Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you, Rebecca, for this kind introduction. I'll start sharing my screen now. Please let me know if you can see it. Right, well, welcome everyone. So today's topic is Mission Impossible 2030. It's based on a real life project that we did for one of our customers. It's become a very famous case study. And I wanted to show how that relates to Microsoft's responsible AI and sustainability goals. And without further ado, let's begin. So let me share. Essentially, the problem that we're talking about is energy sustainability crisis. And according to the EIA, which is an agency of the US Department of Energy, it's estimated that roughly 0.3856 kilogram of carbon dioxide is emitted for each kilowatt hour of energy, which is generated from fossil fuels in the United States. And how this relates to Canada, which is where I'm based, is because we actually generate extra energy, right? So we generate surplus energy and we export it to the United States. And the energy that is generated in Ontario and Quebec, which are two provinces of Canada, is mainly derived from what I would call clean sources. And when I say clean, I'm also including nuclear in that definition. So it does have hydroelectricity as well, and solar and wind, but especially in Ontario, nuclear energy is one of the main contributors to that. And this is directly relevant to Microsoft's sustainability mission, which is basically that Microsoft as a company wants to be carbon negative by 2030. And by 2050, we want to remove our carbon emissions, or historically. And Microsoft's leadership has committed more than $1 billion in Climate Innovation Fund. So as a technology company, we try to solve problems using technologies such as AI. And before I go into the work that we did and how that impacts the environment, I just want to set some context here. So artificial intelligence, by definition, is related to the development of systems or agents that act rationally. And they try to mimic the capabilities of humans, whether it is natural language, computer vision, robotics, and other capabilities as well. Now, machine learning is a subset of that field. And essentially, it's more concerned about designing systems which are able to make predictions or decisions without being hard-coded or programmed to do so. And essentially, this decision-making happens based on the data that the AI system observes. Now, AI is not necessarily a new field. The research, as you probably know, has been going on in this since the Second World War, and Alan Turing famously helped win us the Second World War by cracking the German Enigma machines. And since then, the field has evolved. There was a lot of focus in late 80s in the financial sector and machine learning. And since 2010, deep learning has become quite prominent. So I just want to highlight some of the key contributions that have changed this field dramatically in the last 10 years. And so you'll see me promote my schools here to some extent, but there's a very famous competition that is held in Stanford, which is called the ImageNet competition. And this is where a lot of different researchers or best researchers around the world, they go and they try out their algorithms for AI on an image data set of millions of images across different categories. And before 2010 or 2011, the range for the error rate in those algorithms used to be between 28 to 30% range. And in 2012, there was a dramatic drop in that error rate for an AI algorithm that was created at University of Toronto by Alex Krzyzewski and Ilyas and Jeffrey Hinton. And this basically relied on the deep learning approach, and this is what revolutionized the field. And since then, there have been notable developments. So then the next big one was from the University of Oxford, where they halved the error rate back in 2014 by Karen Simonian and Andrews Zisserman. And then finally, Microsoft Research also halved that error rate in 2015 with their algorithm called the ResNet. And this has actually become the most cited research paper in the century. And this is because it achieved an error rate which was considered to be at par with what one would expect from humans. Based on empirical studies, we had benchmarks available on how much error rate humans would have if they were to do the same task as an AI algorithm trying to classify images into different categories. And so Microsoft Research could claim that we have achieved human parity when it comes to computer vision tasks on several categories of this competition. Since then, the field has evolved and there have been a lot more developments in this area, but AI can also be misused, and there is a recognition of that fact because, even let's say if you have a benign image like that of a panda, but realistically, an image to a computer is a set of numbers, and you can add enough statistical noise in an image by just changing a few bits here and there, and it will completely throw off that AI algorithm's results. And it can lead to misclassification, which, as you can probably see, it will lead to a lot of complications when used in real life systems. And this is where responsible AI comes in, which is where I work in Microsoft. So my role is essentially taking the research that we are doing in the areas of fairness, accountability, transparency, ethics, research that we do, take that according to our responsible AI principles, but then convert that to our products. And so these principles, which are to ensure that they guide us, as we go through our AI system development, is to ensure that the people that the AI system is interacting with, they're being treated fairly. The system in itself is reliable and safe. The security of the people, organizations, and their assets is being given due diligence, and it's inclusive for a diverse group of people. The AI system should be transparent, and you should be able to also hold the system designers accountable, or the people who are operating that system in an environment accountable based on the way the system has been designed and operated. And so the reason from a business point of view is to mitigate risk. And so essentially, we are trying to minimize the risk of consequential impact on people or organizations, and avoid doing applications of AI which may lead to physical or psychological injury or create any sort of threat to human rights. So when I talked about FATE, which is fairness, accountability, transparency, and ethics, we take this research area as well as our guiding principles to convert that into products and processes, trainings and best practices, rules, and governance frameworks, which is how we go into our customer success engagements so that when we deal with our business customers, we are able to then make sure that our systems are being used as we expect. So one of the case studies that I wanted to highlight was the work that I have done with OPG, which is public information. It's been covered in Microsoft blogs and OPG's blogs as well, and I've also given due credit to OPG's from their public website. And so OPG, which stands for Ontario Power Generation, It's a Canadian Crown Corporation, which is basically an extension of the government of Ontario, and they operate 66 hydroelectric stations. They also operate 2 nuclear stations and many different types of stations across Canada and the United States. They also have an extension in Canada which is called the Bruce Power or Bruce stations. So they technically operate 4 nuclear stations, and of course they're in the process of modernizing as this technology has evolved significantly over the years. However, they had a business challenge, which was they were looking at energy derivatives trading. So as I alluded to earlier, energy is being generated in surplus in Canada, and we are exporting that to the United States. And the way that works is that energy is commoditized, and it is sold in units of 1 kilowatt hour in ISO markets, which are basically wholesale markets for distribution of energy across North America. And these derivatives are essentially financial instruments, and the underlying asset here is basically commodities such as oil, gas, or electricity, and this can be traded over the counter on different exchanges. So from a business process perspective, essentially we're looking at forecasting energy supply based on different sources of energy, whether it is nuclear, hydro, electricity, solar, wind, and then take that to predict energy demand, which could be based on weather, time zone, user behaviors, or their location. And finally, detect peaks and dips, so basically anomalies or energy fluctuations at regional and consumer level to tune energy supply. This is used to finally make buy or sell decision based on the historical and seasonal pattern to address the demand in real time. This is where it's also influenced by current trends, because as you probably know, industry and consumers are widely adopting electric vehicles, and that has changed the consumption patterns across the board. People are charging their batteries at different times. There's also customers who are feeding energy back to the grids from their own solar panels. And the issue with that is surplus energy output cannot be utilized or saved in real time. So if you end up generating more energy than you need, you end up wasting it. So given these trends and the business challenges that Ontario Power Generation was facing, Microsoft worked with them to use our AI platform to essentially address these 4 problems by creating AI systems, which essentially automated each step of this process. There were several benefits of doing that, because we essentially ended up creating a trading platform which can now be scaled across North America. We were also able to analyze data from a variety of different sources, whether it was structured data, which is coming from these ISO or wholesale distributors of electricity, or whether it is Internet of Things sensors, which are connected to these facilities. From a cybersecurity perspective, it was also critical, as you know, even in recent events in Europe, energy generation and energy distribution, it is a national security risk. And especially in the cyber domain, this risk gets magnified. So that means you have to manage it. And that requires investing in your people and upskilling them, and also investing in technology to keep up with adverse actors. So in the case of OPG, their AI model that they worked and developed jointly with Microsoft, it's being used daily to schedule power throughout northeastern America, so Canada, and other provinces of United States, New York, New Jersey, and so on. And this has allowed them to export more than 1 terawatt hours of energy, or this is actually I've provided a conversion over here. So that is basically more than 1 trillion kilowatt hours of energy. So based on the earlier statistic that I had mentioned, if you just multiply that, and you can see that you'll end up with this number that there was 385 million tons of carbon dioxide in this process, which, if this export was not done, would have come from the fossil fuels that the different provinces in the United States were generating. So essentially, we have offset that by exporting this extra energy. And that's how we are also able to not only generate and optimize the use of clean energy, but also increase the profit and manage risk for OPG. So I just want to show you a quick video so that you can hear this directly from the customer. It's publicly available.
Microsoft's Michelle Lancaster and Nick Pender of Ontario Power Generation are working together to produce clean power for Canada's biggest province and reduce the carbon footprint of its biggest trading partner, the United States. I'm Michael Hainsworth, learning how real AI is helping everyone from the power producers to the electricity consumers spark smarter decisions and fight climate change. 95% of Ontario's electricity generation is clean. From Niagara Falls to the Kingston Solar Farm 400 kilometers away and everything in between.
So the system's really designed to serve like on a hot summer's day or a cold winter. But when you're between the spring and the fall, you just don't need all that power to heat the homes and power our businesses. And that's when our traders step up and look at how we can manage that position and move clean power out of the province.
For generations, Ontario Power Generation has employed electricity traders to negotiate the sale and routing of unused power to New York State and neighboring provinces.
Like emissions don't care about borders, so whether it's happening above us, to the left or the right or below us is important to us.
It's an opportunity for these regions to replace dirty coal-fired electricity with a clean alternative at a lower price. But over the last decade, things have evolved for both power producers and their power-producing consumers.
But now you've got generators on one side and generators on the other side. So you've got two sets of generation and variable demand in the middle, and that's all interacting. And that's the inherent complication in the system. And it changes, every 5 minutes.
It's been said that if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes. And with customers generating their own electricity, one little cloud can ruin a trader's whole day.
So, we've had clouds since forever. And it's right, but now the system is more complicated than what it was. So if a cloud goes over, you can lose up to sort of 200 megawatts of load on the system. And 200 megawatts of load is, 200,000 homes. And that can happen very easily. 20 years ago, that just didn't happen.
20 years ago, we also didn't have electric cars and heavy industry unexpectedly powering up chargers at 2 a.m. when the prices are the cheapest.
You can have a smooth demand profile all of a sudden peak up for maybe half an hour. There was a little mini peak on the system, entirely battery driven. That's just some behavioral effect of the way a system or aggregation is happening. And that has to be managed real time. We're kind of moving beyond the sort of classical rules of cause and effect. And by unbounding that process and taking a lot more information in, we can look for patterns that probably didn't exist before.
Finding and predicting patterns is what artificial intelligence does best. At Ontario Power Generation, the machine learning algorithm is pulling in a multitude of data points, including current consumption, weather patterns, the price of electricity in New York State, Quebec, and Manitoba, the currency exchange rate, and the calendar. It then advises OPG traders on the best times to sell its environmentally friendly power and when to produce more and less. Microsoft, meantime, is putting its money where its mouth is. It's 4 years away from using 100% renewable energy. It plans to be carbon negative by 2030, and it believes any company can do this by leveraging AI.
This is a space where everyone wants to do the right thing. And what we've seen with Ontario Power is something that we've seen from our own experience, which is why we started rolling it out to our customers.
So, how does an enterprise do the right thing? Where to begin?
Supply chain, data, purchase. We do think that the pressure on companies not just to set targets, but to report on that progress and report on it in increasingly granular ways is going to become sort of table stakes and increasingly regulated.
Microsoft is taking its own advice even further.
I think sustainability has always been thought of as being an expensive thing, but most of the time it's not. Those investments in efficiency can really yield pretty quick return on investment. We have 164 buildings in Redmond. We were manually inspecting and doing all of that work. We created a software overlay that's giving us about 500 million data points a minute now about what's happening from every HVAC unit all the way up to building operation.
Big leaps in technology typically occur when multiple advances are combined to create something new, like the untold number of Internet of Things sensors in those 164 buildings. Marrying industrial IoT with artificial intelligence solved problems Microsoft didn't even know it had.
It's not cheap to implement, but because it lowered the cost of operations, it cut our energy emissions, it also cut a number of other things, including our water bill. That project actually paid for itself within the first 2 years. Investing in sustainability is actually really good for business. Highly rated ESG companies outperform the street average by about 20%. As business and sustainability become deeply intertwined and sustainability data becomes critical to business operation, executive compensation, ratings by Wall Street, that kind of reporting cycle won't work anymore. Data infrastructures that can easily ingest data are going to become just as important as those advanced supply chain tools are for every company right now.
And back at Ontario Power Generation, how is Nick Pender feeling about leveraging artificial intelligence to reduce our carbon footprint?
Does it feel like it's the right direction, and do you feel more empowered and more in control? 100%.
So thank you for watching that video. And I actually want to conclude with a thought experiment. So far I was talking about the province of Ontario, but we also have other provinces in Canada, like Quebec, which are also generating their energy from clean sources. And I just wanted to highlight the potential of implementing a similar solution in other provinces, not only in Canada, but this is a model that can be replicated in Europe and in other countries. Essentially, what it requires is replicating distribution networks for energy so that you can actually allow the power to flow from one country to another country, and making sure that you're investing in hydroelectric, solar, wind, but also nuclear, in order to sustain the demand that we're seeing. And that demand is increasing, especially with the electric vehicles and the recent advances in technology. So if we were to just, follow the train of thought, and if we were to, let's say, assume that the province of Quebec was to generate 100 terawatt hour of energy, and out of that, really, they only need 50 terawatt hour of energy. So half the energy they're generating technically can be exported. So let's assume that there is roughly 34 terawatt hour of energy which is required in the provinces within Canada, whether it is Ontario, New Brunswick, or in the United States in New England or New York or other markets. It still leaves room right now for a 16 terawatt hour of energy which would be wasted. But if we are to take the same model that Ontario Power Generation has done and apply that to Quebec, then what we would see is that essentially it would let their energy traders increase the number of trades that they can do. And if they go from currently doing it manually to doing it in real time using AI, theoretically, they can do more than 30 million trades a year. And that means that they can export and fine tune their energy supply, which can help them reduce waste, which means they can export even more energy that they're generating right now, which directly means there's a revenue impact, right? So they can increase their revenue from, in this theoretical scenario, to 2.7 billion to roughly 4 billion. So if you see from all financial metrics, whether it's growth, revenue, but also the impact from a sustainability or environmental perspective, theoretically it can reduce billions of tons of carbon dioxide. But at the same time, you're essentially scaling up your business process using AI. You're scaling up energy derivatives trading. You're optimizing your operations, and while it is also leading to the growth in revenue, it's actually a sustainable growth. It's this competitive advantage that it creates is a sustainable process, and it helps us mitigate the risk to environment. So at this point, I would like to conclude my presentation and take questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rahul. That was absolutely fascinating. I wonder if I can kick off the questions. I'm just fascinated to know how you got into this area of work in the first place.
So after my studies at Oxford, I worked for consulting firms for some time. And as I mentioned, there were big developments in AI that happened at University of Toronto as well as University of Oxford. I did my undergraduate degree at University of Toronto, so I knew some of those researchers personally, and also at University of Oxford, it gave me a broader exposure to AI and other technologies in software engineering. So it helped me broaden my perspective. But then in consulting industry, as this research started getting adopted more and more by customers, I got interested in actually applying this technology to solve their business challenges. And then finally, I was able to, with some experience, go to Microsoft, and because I was already using some of their technology stack. So it just made sense for me to move to Microsoft. And then over the years, I've changed roles, but I've still been in AI. So in my current role, I'm a principal program manager for the responsible AI team. And my focus is basically making sure that the products that we are developing in our Azure Cognitive Services portfolio that is being developed according to our responsible AI principles and the broader research that we are doing in FATE, or fairness, accountability, transparency, ethics. I know it's kind of a mouthful, but that's what it is.
Thank you very much. It's just so interesting to get an insight. So I've got another question here. And that is, what happens in countries that just don't have the physical space or funds to instigate clean energy producers?
So this is more, it's a valid question. Now, I think we need to take it on a case-by-case basis, right? So if you're referring to countries which have developmental challenges, essentially we need to see in the geography what other countries, nearby countries, if at all, can actually supply that energy. The second thing is we need to ensure that there is investment, whether it is through some of the organizations like the UN, or some of the philanthropists like Bill Gates or whoever. There is some investment that is definitely required for those countries to create these distribution networks across borders. Now, this is only feasible if the country is generating surplus energy, right? So in this equation, this trade can only happen if there is excess supply of energy, and then there is a demand. So while I don't claim that this will solve all the world's problems, but in certain specific scenarios, it can help if we were to focus on geographies and countries where we can find the right characteristics for such a specific use case to work.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself there.
No problem.
Thank you. It's so interesting. I'm just going to ask our online audience if they have any further questions for you. It's just such a fascinating area, and this has given me a completely different perspective. I'm not sure what I was exactly expecting, but it's just so interesting, Rahul. So I'm just going to ask whether any of our online attendees have any more questions for you. And if not, I think I will say, Rahul, thank you so very much for an absolutely fascinating talk. I found that really thought-provoking.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. It was lovely to connect back with Oxford and with you and the rest of the Kellogg team. I really
Thank
look
you.
fondly to my days there. So thank you very
Oh,
much.
thank you. Well, I hope we'll be able to welcome you back here in person before too long.
I hope so too. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you to our online audience for being with us this afternoon, wherever you are in the world. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.